You know what I got the other day, Pete? Stephen King's latest. Want to borrow it?
Do you know who you're talking to?
What do you mean?
Andy, when's the last time I read a paper book? It's been decades. I would much rather use Kindle, or better yet, Audible.
What am I thinking? I don't read paper books anymore either. I'm an audiobook guy all the way. For those looking to listen to the books behind the films that we talk about here on Movies We Like, not to mention all the other podcasts in the Next Reel family, get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at thenextreel.com/audible.
There are so many great adaptations from Movies We Like available in audio form.
Early on, we covered Casino Royale with director Matthew Gratzner. You went through all of the 007 books on Audible, right?
I did indeed. What a series. We also covered Room with legendary Dee Wallace and Never Let Me Go with costume designer Alana Mooreshead.
We chatted about Fat City with cinematographer Sam Levy and Silver Linings Playbook with the great composer Harry Gregson Williams.
101 Dalmatians and Bambi.
Apocalypse Now, There Will Be Blood, The Thin Red Line.
There's so many great adaptations with so many great guests, and you can get all these as audiobooks on Audible, along with thousands of other great reads.
Producing this podcast is a lot of fun, but it does take a lot of time. We have already dropped the dynamically inserted ads because they are so annoying and have no connection to our content.
Plus, they just jam those things in wherever they see fit.
We listened when you said you didn't like them. So now, we're directly appealing to you, our dear listener. Please consider an Audible subscription to help support Movies We Like and the Next Reel's family of podcasts.
I've been using Audible along with my family for decades now. I love it, and I've read hundreds of books through it. Couldn't be more pleased with their service, and I know you'll love it too. Head to thenextreel.com/audible and get your free trial. It really helps us out. And you have a world of over 200,000 audiobooks open to you.
So much great material available. Dive in with a free trial and get your first free audiobook at thenextreel.com/audible.
Start listening to amazing audiobooks of your favorite movie source material with your first free audiobook today. That's thenextreel.com/audible. Andy, I know you've never been happier than when you're sitting by a warm fire, snuggled up in a flannel and basking in the glow of an old-school budget spreadsheet.
It is a special day I can shut down the world for a little me time.
In a world full of applications, why do these antiquated documents and spreadsheets still run the world? And why haven't they been updated in over 50 years? That's why we want to talk about Coda.
Coda is a new kind of doc that brings words, data, and teams together. It comes with a set of building blocks that anyone can combine to create a doc as powerful as an app.
Coda runs our entire business here at True Story FM, from show scheduling across dozens of podcasts and scripts for thousands of episodes, to budgets and plans and wikis and more.
Coda lets us see our business in a new light. If you'd like to shine a light on productivity in your business and save money along the way, check out Coda today at thenextreel.com/Coda. Welcome to the Next Reel Speakeasy on rashpixel.fm. I'm Andy Nelson, and that over there is Pete Wright.
It's Pete Wright.
The Next Reel Speakeasy is a podcast where we invite a guest from the industry to join us, and instead of serving up their favorite cocktails, they serve up movies that they love so that we can all talk about them. We'd like to welcome our guest to this month's show, cinematographer and entrepreneur, Nic Sadler. Hey there, Nick.
I feel jilted. I had cocktails ready to go.
Well, send one over.
So this is not about drinking?
It could be.
It's always
never
about
too
drinking.
late for that.
Okay. This is not really about the film industry.
So Nick graduated in 1985 with a BA in Communications and Film Studies. He began working as a PA, then later as a camera assistant in film and television before moving to London in 1989. There, he worked for 6 years, primarily as first camera assistant to Johnny Matheson, best known as the cinematographer on the film Gladiator. In 1995, he began his career as a cinematographer in his own right, shooting music videos. He shot over 200 music videos, 30 concert films, 500 commercials, numerous TV shows, and 3 award-winning feature films. And I think from there, let's just jump in. Let's start with cinematography. You moved to LA shortly after that, and I will say, Pete and I just watched a film that you co-shot, I guess I could say, called Coherence, which we had a fantastic time with.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Coherence. So that was Jim Burkett. I worked with him before on Pirates of the Caribbean. We did this kind of very expensive short film. Most short films you make for I don't know, like $10,000. This short film had a budget of just shy of $1 million.
Wow.
And it was basically a ruse by the studio to keep the Black Pearl set open, as far as I could see. I mean, it wasn't making a lot of sense. Jim had done a lot of the previs on with Gore Verbinski on Pirates, and is a very accomplished filmmaker himself. And he contacted me, so we did this crazy short film, which is like an extension of one of the scenes in Pirates. It's called Wedding Bells, where the two disreputable women who are associated with Jack Sparrow think they're both going to get married to him, but they're getting sold off at a slave kind of on a slave ship. It's quite funny. So we'd worked on this kind of crazy $1 million 12-minute short, and then we went from that to a feature film which we shot in 3 days. So a whole of Coherence is shot in 3 days.
Oh my goodness!
So it was. I got involved kind of early on, and I set up how we were going to do it. There was some reshoots and some pickups that were done when I wasn't available. They're the other DP that's credited. But essentially, my task was to work with Jim to figure out how to deliver something of the scope of Coherence in a very short space of time. And we literally had 3 days to shoot it in. And what we did is we mapped it out a bit like a play. We shot it with multiple cameras a couple of times a night, and we did it all the way through. And I learned a lot of interesting things about how to go about filmmaking from a different perspective, because one part of my life is very technical, and the other part of my life is very chaotically kind of artistic. So I try and jam these two things together to make something work, and it usually ends up being a technical decision you have to make about which way you're going to be going with things. But I think it worked out okay. It's for the kind of film it is. It worked out much better than I was expecting.
I know we came together to talk about a different film altogether, but I have to know, because I had such a fantastic time at this film, I just need to know a little bit more, but because you said something that triggered me. It's a trigger event.
You said you
had
trigger
3 days.
word.
You had people shooting
3 8-hour days, not long days.
3 8-hour days. I'm thinking 72 straight hours that you just start shooting and don't sleep, and I can see that happening. But 8-hour days, and you did it straight through.
Yeah. So we basically
like a play,
a play would last of that kind of material, given the fact you're cutting it down to a shade over an hour and a half.
Right.
You've got 2 hours, 2.5 hours of time to be able to play that out in real time, so that the story is pretty much in real time. It jumps. The chronology is pretty linear, and it takes place in one very limited location. So it was over length. We played it out like a play, shot it as creatively as we could, and then made running decisions as to how to cover things. All of the lighting for the film is in the center of the room. I lit the entire film from stuff we bought at IKEA. So the lighting budget didn't involve any traditional film equipment at all. I just abandoned that. It was like, it's pointless. So I went to I got paper Chinese lanterns, LED light bulbs, in-hand domestic dimmers, and wired it. I did it all myself, and just wired it all into the ceiling roses, and made up a lighting rig that we couldn't see. Now the reason why we couldn't see it is the aspect ratio of the film is 2:3:9 to 1. There's two reasons why we did it that way. One, and this is something that Jim, the director, doesn't really. I don't think he remembers these conversations, but they're indelibly fixed in mind, because I just can't forget stuff like this. In order to keep the lights out, I needed to make sure that there was virtually no headroom, and that the rooms didn't have any height. So one of the problems of shooting widescreen inside is that you just don't see ceilings, and it is slightly claustrophobic and is disconcerting. Claustrophobic and disconcerting is two things that I wanted for this, so there wasn't a problem.
I think that was actually the tagline on the poster. Coherence, claustrophobic and disconcerting.
So they gave me a license to be able to put stuff in the ceiling that I knew I wouldn't be able to see. And what's more, that we shot it with DSLRs, 5Ds. We had 4 of them, with prime lenses, and those were kept pretty consistent. So there was is possible to intercut between the cameras pretty easily. And then we could see the lights in the viewfinder, and we could deliberately frame them out of our exposed area by seeing them all the time. So they were always, when we look framing up with the camera, we could always see the lights, and we were always keeping the lights just outside a shot. The other part of the equation was that we were training the actors into knowing where the camera would be and where their eye lines would draw, and trying not to move the cameras too much. So you could place the camera in a position, it was all handheld as well, so you could put the camera in a position, hold a line, knowing that an actor would fill the negative space. So if you're dealing with an actor and saying, hey, look, with an actor, you never say, dude, come stand here. You say, you look fantastic here. Then they'll stand wherever you want. You could say, you look fantastic here. It could be on the edge of a windy cliff. They wouldn't give a toss. They'll stand there. If you appeal to their vanity, it goes well every single time. So if you say to an actor, you want screen dominance, come here and show the back of your head, and on your killer line, turn the camera and deliver it, or cross the camera and work it in your head. Like you think, okay, I've got it's not on me at the moment, but when it comes to me, the audience is going to look at me. So be in a place in the frame whereby you can then control that emphasis. And for God's sake, don't do it all of the time, because then you look like a screen hog, and no one likes that.
That's brilliant.
That is so cool. It was so much fun. So you shot it all together. When the characters left the room, right? When they leave the house, the two guys leave the house.
There's cameras outside picking them up.
There's cameras outside shooting. So they're shooting, essentially, you're getting coverage of them while you're still shooting on the inside.
Yeah. And that, to me, that was like a part of the economy. I was thinking, there's no reason why not to shoot that way. And the actors are really engaged with it. And it's something I want to do again under different circumstances. I don't think there's any reason not to tell really good stories economically if you can get everyone to play a different game. Filmmaking is like there's a flow to it, and there's a technique to it. And with new technologies, that flow and technique can change over time. And I'm really into the psychology of it, and I'm interested in screwing with people to get them to get different performances or different look or a different approach and tell more interesting stories.
Very Soderbergh of you.
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, slightly different pay scale there.
Yeah. Right. Well, what I think is so fascinating about you is, aside from the fact that you're a working cinematographer, you also started up this company, Chemical Wedding, in which you design. It's kind of like you're an entrepreneur in the field of tools for filmmakers, right? You've made this great tool, Artemis Prime, that is basically like a director's viewfinder that they can use with their iPhone or iPad. You've done the ProLight simulator, Helios, that they can use, and then the HD tool that you also have, right? There's a number of different things. The light simulation one, yeah.
Yeah, I've been tinkering around with technology for a long time. But when I was in England, I had a few ideas about pieces of equipment that I'd wanted to use, and they got made after I talked about it with companies. They said, like, I want to do this. That equipment got made and actually got sold without me really benefiting from it at all. And it's happened 2 or 3 times. I made for ARRI in London, I made one of the very early swing shift systems when we used a Sinar plate camera front end. And I did that way before that became a kind of a successful kind of tool to use in cinematography. I made one back then. I made a prototype of a light that became the ARRI Ruby 7. I've been kind of tinkering around with this for a long time. It wasn't until I came to LA that it occurred to me that I could actually do it and make money out of it and have a life doing that kind of stuff as well as the cinematography I was doing. And in a weird way, I got distracted from cinematography getting into the technology side of things. So the very first thing we did as a company is we invented the iPhone hadn't come out yet, and I'm sitting at the back of my house with 2 friends of mine getting drunk and just talking, doing the what if. And I said, look, there's this application. I use a desktop application that tells me sunrise and sunset times during the day. And everyone in the film industry uses this. You go out and set with a compass and a sighting inclinometer and this sheet of paper called Sun Path. And you figure out where the sun's going to come and where it's going to go down and the length of the day and where the sun's going to be through the day. And I said, it'd be great if this was just in your pocket and in your iPhone. And the iPhone wasn't even released yet, but we were hanging on it, waiting for it to come out. So when the iPhone came out, we were already down the path of making an application, and Helios was the first thing that we made. We had to buy a database from NASA that had the position of the sun in 15-minute increments for the next 100 years everywhere in the world. It was very expensive. Essentially an Excel document. That document is worth absolutely nothing now. It's like it has no commercial value at all because it's like virtually everywhere. And we made this first tool, and we put it in the iPhone and in the App Store, and we priced it at $30. And Apple was like, $30? That's weird. That's like we were the most expensive app in the App Store.
This was when they're all like 99 cents, right?
Yeah. So in the early days of the App Store, it was we were in the featured section, which is like, they would feature like 4 apps and 4 developers. So it was EA Games, Sony, someone else, so like someone like I think it was like NFL or something, and us. This 3 Englishman startup in LA with the most expensive app in the App Store. And from there, I came up with an idea for Director's Viewfinder, which I actually sketched out on a piece of paper as I was flying back from a job, and I put it in front of my business partner, and he said, "Oh, this will never catch on." It's like I can't see the point of this. Anyway, that's become like the most popular piece of software on set in the film industry. I mean, every single film up for an Academy Award this year was made in some way with that software.
It's fantastic.
And that's been going back for years and years. And so basically, you kind of, it swallowed my life, basically. The technology just swallowed me whole. So people now know, they don't know me as a cinematographer much anymore. They know me as, that's the guy you did Artemis.
He's the one.
I don't know how to read how you're saying that. Is that okay with you at some level, or are you living with the weight of regret that that you forked your life a little bit?
I'm
too
not
hard?
at all regretful of it because I'm very proud of it. But there is so much about working in the creative arts that if people get to know you for something, they don't think of you as being much outside of that. It's very, very difficult to, I don't consider myself to be one particular thing. I mean, I carve my life up between doing fine art stills photography that you can't show your mum.
Which is fantastic also.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
But not for not for popular consumption, and it's a bit edgy, and it's like I like it, and I think it's challenging, and I really enjoy it. So that's kind of commercial, but non-commercial. Then the my film work, which I'm doing less of now, but I want to get back into again, and then the technology side, which started with applications, is now turned into hardware. So I've designed a physical viewfinder system called Artemis Prime that's finding its way onto a lot of kind of bigger budget TV shows and movies at the moment. And I'm also consulting with a company that's designing lenses as well. So and then I'm also doing a podcast every week, which is called From the Bunker. I just have this kind of very diffused life. It used to be that I was just a DP. But now, and there's a strange thing with people in the film industry that you self-identify with the job that you do. People say, "What do you do?" And prior to coming to LA, I would say, "I'm a DP," And when they go, "Oh, they know what you like." First, you never ever buy anyone a drink. What's the difference between a drink? What's the difference between a DP and a coconut?
I don't know.
If you have a hammer, you can get a drink out of a coconut. That's a classic cliche about DPs. See, so I was a DP, and I come with all the DP baggage. Geeky, tight, obsessive about certain stuff, and that was all true. But now I've got this much more diffused life where I'm much more I've got an artistic side, I've got a political side, I've got a technological side, and I've got the cinematography side. And now people ask me what I do, and I say, I don't know. I just don't know anymore. I don't know where I am. I just do stuff. I get up in the morning and do stuff, and whatever is in front of me, I do that.
Well, let's talk about this movie.
Yeah, so we are here to talk about your favorite film, or one of your favorite films, I guess.
Which suddenly is not a surprise to me at all.
It's definitively the most favorite film I have. I don't think there's a second. I don't think there's another contender. This is it, the only one.
This movie and all the other movies that just exist.
It's like when I saw this film, I thought, right, that's it. This is what I want to do, because it was, and I saw it when I was 14 years old.
Wow.
14, 15. Like, I don't think I was even supposed to see it at that age. And it
Yeah,
had
that's young
such
to
an
watch this
impression on me. And it's for those who haven't seen the film, I'll just give a little synopsis on it. It's about a guy who's in the entertainment industry who falls in love with his own death. It really is, and it was made by a guy who essentially the film's an autobiography, and he checks out in exactly the same way that's shown in the movie. It's really it's not only prophetic, but it's deeply touching and very funny, and it's basically become like a little, I don't know, is a prophecy of my own life in lots of ways. So it's also a kind of a warning, which I've heeded on so many occasions. I think, what would Joe Gideon do? I won't do that.
Let's stay away from that.
If it's a prophecy of your own life, I'm glad we got you when we did. I don't even think we've said what the movie is called yet. For those who haven't seen it, it's All That Jazz.
Yeah, it's a musical. I hate musicals. I do. And I think the director I respect most in the world, Bob Fosse, was cut his teeth making musicals. But prior to seeing All That Jazz, I would never consider seeing a musical. I will balk at seeing a musical now, but I don't think there's a single... He didn't make a bad movie. He was a bona fide genius and a crazy pervert to boot.
He's a very interesting figure, absolutely. And this is a movie that he made. It was the second to last film that he did, and he didn't do a lot of films. Only, I think, 5? I think?
He did. He started with Sweet Charity, then went on to Cabaret, did All That Jazz, Lenny, and Star 80. And Star 80 is a masterclass in setting you up to feel uncomfortable for almost 2 hours. Because what he does is he starts with the brutality and then goes straight into the sweet stuff. And you can't get over the fact that the sweet stuff is going to end so badly. So even that he juxtaposes the two so quickly that you just cannot... You're just waiting for something really horrible to happen. It's just, you know it when it's going to happen. You know the period. He just sets you up and manipulates you to feel bad the entire time. It takes a true psycho to do that.
Well, it's so interesting because this is a film that I've seen a number of times, and I will say when I first watched this, which was probably post college, like shortly after I graduated from college, something like that. I watched this film, and I just think I was not ready for it. It hit me in a way where I was like, "Wow, that was one of the most painful film experiences to watch. I don't think I ever want to see it again." But it was a film that stuck with me for a very long time. And then I remember they restored it, and I watched it again when it had been restored, and I think they just released the Blu-ray or something like that. And I looked at it again, and it hit me in a totally different way where I actually kind of, I don't know, I just felt like I got it. And it hit me in a way where it was this really powerful experience. And just watching Joe Gideon move through this period in his life where he's just, there's just so many things happening, and just all of this pain and love and this drive for success, and the push that he has that's driving him to all of the pills and the just all the things that he needs to kind of keep moving. I don't know. It hit me in a way where I'm like, wow, there's so much going on in this film. And just like that, it's saying so much about life in the entertainment industry, and not just the entertainment industry. I think it really is just about life in any field where you are really trying to push yourself, and you're pushing, to get like great success. And I don't know. I found that there was actually a lot more in this film, and it really moved me. And I think upon rewatching it again, it's a film that I think really says a whole lot. And what my question was that I found so interesting, just to think about, is like I understand that this is like there's so much autobiographical information in this film about Bob Fosse and his life, but do you think that really matters? Like, do you think that somebody who knows nothing about Bob Fosse could just walk into this film and watch it and get something out of it that is as profound as if you know that, hey, this is really kind of a pseudo autobiography about Bob
I'm with
Fosse?
The French semioticians with regards to the link between author and audience. As far as I'm concerned, as soon as the film was made, the author may as well never have existed. So the director may as well just have evaporated into the ether. They're that irrelevant to what the film does when it's being viewed. Now, a lot of people in the film industry and a lot of reviewers will say, hey, look, I really feel like I'm accessing the director through what they've done, and I empathize. Well, that's just crap. I mean, it's just crap. I made this film called Intellectual Property. The title got changed for Intellectual Property to Dark Mind with a very talented director called Nick Peterson. And when I read the script, I thought, wow, man, this is like pretty over the dial. It's like pretty crazy. And Nick's like a Mormon and kind of quite conservative thinker. But at the same time, he wrote this deeply subversive film. Now, it didn't do great business here, but it did really well in Iran. And they read it like an anti-US parody. And yeah, you can read it that way. I mean, it doesn't. What Nick's intentions are meaningless, and Nick has got a good sense and intelligence to say, yeah, that's right. That's what it is. So for you, that's what it is. Who was he to argue? And I think with Bob Fosse, I don't think it's necessary to think that that you need to access the mind of Bob Fosse through this. However, since it's told with such brutal honesty, and there's lines in it where you think someone's actually said this. Someone's actually said this,
right.
And there's this spectacular moment, and I might say I'm not too sure if I can say this particular word or not. There's a moment in the film where Joe Gideon, his character has got this girlfriend, and she's caught him having sex with one of his dancers, and they're having a conversation. She's sitting on a bed, and he's basically talking to her as to whether she should not go away on this tour, and she's teasing him into submission by saying that she's going to be starring opposite this very, very handsome dancer. And Joe Gideon he's a short guy, and he's kind of and he's a lot older than this girlfriend he's got. And he's really trying to be as level-headed as he can, and he's trying to say to her, look, yeah, you should go, because I am just not a good person. And if you want to stay with me, that's great, but I am just not a good person. And she says that she knows he's generous. He gives her gifts. He gives her everything. He gives her his time. She just wishes he wasn't so generous with his cock. And it's one of those moments that you think, someone's actually said that. And he's remembered it. And what's
right? That's
and
an
what's
inspired
more, what's
line.
more, he then leaves the room and says, "Wow, I should get that in the film somewhere." Because you're thinking what he's thinking, and the timing that he gets the actor to say it is because all the filmmakers in the room are thinking, "Wow, yeah, I'd stick that." And he delivers that little line, that little cap on the end. He gives it to you just at the right moment. So there's all these little kind of moments in the film that you can trace back to his experience as a choreographer and as a director. And he was a reprobate. He really was. I mean, he was a drinking, drug-taking, womanizing nightmare that everyone was in love with. And essentially that's what the film is about. And he knows it's going to kill him. And so he decides to get Jessica Lange to play Death. That's just the pinnacle of vanity to do that. But it's so blatant, he just does it. Who's going to play Death? Jessica Lange, the most beautiful woman in Hollywood.
And she's going to smile the whole time. And we're going to name her Angelique. Right. Angelique. It's just, it's diabolical. The thing, I mean, to your point, I absolutely see it, but I'm one of those bastards who actually believes that context is everything. And that even if, that there is a certain gift, particularly in this film, that comes from knowing the background of the film. And there are some films where there is no gift of that context, right? You just, like you say, the filmmaker might as well be dead and buried by the time you actually watch the movie. But this film, I think, it's made better by having an understanding of Bob Fosse and the fact that this sort of, not only is it autobiographical, but it's almost contemporary to the autobiography, right? It is an amazing story, and it is made more amazing when you know what he went through to do it.
Yeah, there's no doubt that when you learn the context, it colors your viewpoint of the film you've seen, but they don't really it doesn't need to be there. I mean, I'm very interested in Bob Fosse's life, and I've read a lot about his life, and I've seen all of his films multiple times. Not quite as many times as I've seen All That Jazz. And he is Sweet Charity is the first film, is just amazing. And this is also the guy, Bob Fosse has very, very unlikely fans. Michael Jackson, his entire dance career was a basic lame imitation of Bob Fosse. And if you think that's an exaggeration, just watch any clips on YouTube that you can see about The Little Prince and watch Bob Fosse's dance moves in The Little Prince, and then look at Michael Jackson's career immediately afterwards. And Michael Jackson imitated a scene in a film about a young boy being seduced by a devil man. Now, if that makes any sense to you at all in the context of Michael Jackson's life, it's pretty amazing. But you cannot look at Michael Jackson's dance moves and not see Bob Fosse in them. And Bob Fosse is not a credited guy to that, but Michael Jackson is essentially plagiarizing Bob Fosse.
But what you can see a lot, which I definitely agree with you, and I don't know dance. Like I really enjoy musicals. I'm opposite of you.
You're an incredible dancer.
That is something that is completely not true. I love musicals, but like dance, I find really hard to sit through. Like if I go to a show that's just like a dance show, like I struggle with that. I need a story. I need something else happening with that. But when I watch what Bob Fosse does with his dancers in his shows, like I see movements, just the way that people move and the shapes that they put themselves in and everything, I find really fascinating. And that's something that that draws me in more to what Bob Fosse is doing with the dance in his stuff. And I definitely can see that in Michael Jackson, because Michael Jackson was somebody who had a lot of like iconic positions that he would end up in,
which he stole from Bob Fosse.
Which, absolutely. There is definitely that through line. And you could even take it to like a lot of the modern dance that you see in music videos and stuff. I think there's definitely a path that people have taken. I mean, you see what Bob Fosse did in the erotica scene in this film, which is just a brilliant way to deconstruct what is essentially kind of a very average musical moment when they sing the Take Off With Me song. And then it turns into that erotica thing. And it's like, wow, there's so much more now that they've just done this with that song. And then you take what the dancing and everything in there, and you can transfer that just through Michael Jackson all the way to just everything that has gone on since. It's really a brilliant path that I think Fosse carved for the dancing world as he kind of left this world and just made all of that available to everybody after him.
In the middle of the erotica scene, there is a part where the promoter turns to its cohort, the lawyer, I think, and says, "Oh no, there goes the children's audience." And it's in the middle of this absolutely fantastic spectacle, but their perspective is one purely of commerce, and it's just so funny.
Commerce or just straight up banality, like the lines that he has under the context of this incredible dance scene are things like, "Oh, they're taking their clothes off," which is just like so ridiculous.
I think he became one of my favorite characters in the movie. Like all the stuff that he has, the scenes with John Lithgow, as like their conversations, like there's just the most brilliant like subtext underneath, which is just like the sleaziest like of Hollywood business, like happening with the two of them every time they converse.
When the fan comes up to Lithgow and when he's just about to take over the project and says, "I love your work. I'm so sorry our last film was a flop."
Right. I was just going to say that line. That encapsulates the entire narrative of the movie, right? It's really delightful. I have not seen it as many times as it sounds like either of you, clearly, but I struggle with the last half hour because it is so raw, right? And it's amazing to me that I can say it's raw and it's full of sort of the heaviest number of song and dance numbers, but they are really hard to watch. Like going through the surgery, going through making the surgery a song and dance it was a real struggle for me to balance those two things.
There's a
And get
when
joy
he gets
out
out of the surgery and he's in recovery and he breaks out of the recovery area and he gets into the basement of the hotel and he finds this old black janitor and they do a bit of soft shoe together and he basically, and it's like, it's so touching because all he wants to do is to be around someone who just appreciates what he does. And when the porters take him away, his response to one of the porters is, "What? Don't you like musical comedy?" And it's a reference to us in the film because he's putting us through this utterly horrible situation where this guy is like bleeding all over the hospital walls and kind of, is in the process of dying. And he's challenging us with that statement. You're like, don't you like what you're seeing? What's wrong? Isn't this funny?
Exactly. That's a great point. He's
he does it all the way through the
me.
film. So it's always like he doesn't quite break the fourth wall. He just kind of presses up against it and brings you into a position where, you feel as though he's talking to you, but he's not really. He's being oblique about it. And I think that's one of the skills of the film. He's very good at. He's an arch manipulator. I think that's really important characteristic for directors. And it's one of the things which I find really intriguing about good directors. I was told this story once about Alfred Hitchcock. If he would go to meetings and he'd be with someone and they would like be heading towards an elevator, and Hitchcock would inexplicably cut into the middle of a very gruesome story. And they would speak quite loudly and he would get into the elevator, tell the story, and then on the floor he wanted to be at, the doors would open and he would leave, still talking the story, but not to the point not to the pivotal point of the story. He would leave the elevator with everyone else enthralled in the elevator, not getting to the pivotal point. And he would walk out of the elevator and then cut back straight into what he was talking about. He just did this purely to manipulate his audience, and his audience was 6 people in an elevator going 3 floors. And he did it. It almost like a honed skill of knowing how to pick someone up at the right point in the story and take them to the point where they really want the answer and then not giving it to them. Knowing how to do that in that really quite nasty Machiavellian kind of way is a skill that you need to be a good director. You need to know how to manipulate people. And where all that jazz is so fantastic for me is it's so deeply manipulative of everything. It's a story about someone who has manipulated everyone in his life, all the people who love him, his daughter, his mistress, his wife, his friends. He's manipulating all of them, and they still love him, and he's still going to die, and he can't do anything about it at all. It's the bleakest story ever, and
it's the bleakest story ever, full of it's got these moments. The moment when Kate and Michelle do their song and dance in the condo is absolutely a highlight of the movie for me. I mean, their dance is full of such joy, and as a reminder of the kind of joy that he at one point allowed himself to experience. It's a beacon.
Yeah, it's a great scene.
Well, and the film is really just a celebration of this type of storytelling that you get. I mean, Bob Fosse has a magical gift, the way that he kind of puts this really dark story forward with humor and sarcasm and wit and everything. But I think, looking at, he wrote this with Robert Allen Arthur. They did a great job of kind of pulling some elements from Bob Fosse's life, but not making a complete biopic. I think they do a really good job of kind of dancing that line. There's elements of kind of his directing Lenny at the same time he was the directing the film Lenny, while at the same time directing the play Chicago. I believe that's the period in his life where he actually had the heart attack. And you get little bits of that here with kind of him making that kind of Lenny-ish film that he keeps jumping and working in. And I love that here is this character, that stand-up character who's talking about death and always introducing us to this 5-step process: anger, denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance.
Which is from the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross book, but that's not the order the stages are in. Right. They actually misquote it in the film deliberately. It's in the wrong order.
Interesting. So, but I think that's so interesting that even regardless of the order, the fact that he ties that in here and brings that in as an element in his story about his brush with death, basically, I find that so interesting. And working with the editor that he worked with, I think we have to talk a little bit about Alan Heim and just the way that this film was cut together. It really is one of the reasons that I find it such a compelling film, because the cutting back and forth throughout this film, whether it's cutting from the way that it cuts from scene to scene or within a scene, the way that dances are cut together, the way that we get those almost breaking the fourth wall cuts to him as he's talking with Angelique and kind of that place that's just kind of, it's almost like an amalgam, this dark amalgam of all the elements of his life, right, where they're sitting. It's fascinating the way the film is cut together.
It is. I have stalked Alan Heim. I was in Poland at Camera
Does he know that?
Oh yeah, he knows it flat out. I told him. I was at Camera Mars and 1 year, and he was there, and I thought, how can I have a sustained conversation with Alan Heim? So I made sure I was sitting next to him on the plane back to London. Talked to him the whole time. He was charmed and happy to talk about it. I think I have gone out of my way to meet many people who've worked on that movie. And Anne Renken, I cornered her. She was on a job that I did, and it was it's Alan Heim's cutting of this film, and we'll get to that when we talk about the scene later on. He is a spectacular film editor that displays amazing sense of pace in this film. There are scenes where there's so many little tiny cuts, and the dancing is allowed to kind of play out in a way which isn't too cutty, but he uses very fast editing to emphasize certain moments in the flow. It's so much of music video editing I see, and I think it's just too glitzy and too much going on, and a lot of music video editors should look at what Alan Heim did and all that jazz, and understand that there is a better way of cutting. There's a better way of getting flow in a story than to just throw thousands of cuts at something. I mean, it's such a beautifully cut movie. It's amazing, and he's in the movie as well. There's a scene in the film where they're cutting the film about the stand-up, and they're in the editing suite, and there's Alan Heim in front of a moviola pulling stuff out. Yeah,
it's brilliant.
It's spectacular.
And he did a few films. I think he did Lenny, this, and Star 80 with Fosse. So he worked with him a number of times.
Yeah, he did. He did Star 80. He did All That Jazz. He did. I don't think he did Lenny. I didn't do Cabaret or Sweet Charity.
Oh, but he did do the TV show Liza with a Z. With him and Liza.
Yeah.
So he did work on that. So
he did, yeah.
And another of our favorite films on this show, Network. So he's been cutting lots of great stuff.
Yeah. And a film which I think every single person who watches Fox News should perhaps watch again now.
You're messing with the primary forces of nature, Mr. Beale, and I will not have it.
Isn't that fantastic? That shot down the table, and when he's got his hands up, it's just superb.
Oh, legendary!
Yeah,
those lights,
incredible. Who could make Beatty look like a god? That's fantastic. Anyhow, and we haven't actually said, we haven't uttered the words the great Roy Scheider, and we have not actually done a series on Roy Scheider, but we have talked about it a lot, particularly Roy Scheider in the 70s. He is
before the plastic surgery. That get weird.
Does that actually define the break for Roy?
After the plastic surgery kicked in, I think he it just became a bit weird. But he's completely forgivable for Jaws and all that jazz.
We actually we're such fans of his because he did so many great movies in the 70s that we're like, we created this list over on our website where it's like Roy Scheider ruled the 70s. Because I mean, if you look at his career in the 70s, I mean, he was starting in Klute and going all the way through this. He had such a fantastic career in the 70s that really, I think, defined what a 70s actor really was doing. I mean, I really found everything that he did just engrossing. Klute, French Connection, Seven Ups is
Marathon
fantastic.
Man.
Jaws, Marathon Man,
Marathon
Sorcerer.
Man, right.
Maybe not Jaws 2 so much.
What's wrong with Jaws 2?
But
No, but
Last Embrace. No, it's good. It's just not Jaws, but Last Embrace, all that jazz.
Everybody knows the real Jaws is Jaws 3D.
Yeah.
So,
that's exactly.
but I got to take it all the way up to 83 with Blue Thunder. That is a very, very guilty pleasure of mine. I adore Blue
That's
Thunder.
an extremely guilty pleasure. Yeah.
There you go. Hey, you shut your mouth, Sadler. You shut it.
Everyone's got one. Come
That
on.
was a dig. I almost took it as a compliment, and I know that was a dig.
Do you know what mine is at the moment?
What?
John Wick.
You don't have to be guilty about that.
No,
There's nothing
my
to
wife hates the fact that I like John Wick. Hates it. People will come around and they'll say, "Hey, what should we watch?" I say, "Well, if we get stuck, we could watch John Wick." And she'll say, "We're not watching that," and she'll leave the room.
We just talked about Point Break on the show, and that's
Point Break.
Yeah.
We did talk about Point Break. So
Yeah. We're fans.
anyhow.
We're fans of Keanu and his action stuff. He's good. He carries the action well.
He does. I need to watch Blue Thunder again. Actually, I haven't seen it in quite some time.
worth it. Jeff.
On your recommendation, I'll dig it up again.
We'll have to have you back.
Okay.
All right. So anyway, Roy Scheider, fantastic as in this part, and I think it's one of those pieces where, he's. I don't know. I mean, I feel like I get a sense of who Roy Scheider is in these other movies, Frank Ligurian and Buddy Russo and Clute and French Connection. But in this movie, I get a sense that he is, I should say, more invested in the identity of this character of Joe than in many of these other films that are sort of replaceable, swappable. This film is uniquely Scheider for me.
I think any actor being asked to play this role has to confront some of the nastier, darker sides of a society that's dominated by the wilds of men, particularly in the 1970s. You're being forced to confront elements of yourself which are distasteful. And then and what Fosse manages to do is he manages to take some of those distasteful characteristics and make them funny and make you empathize, but it's still a little distasteful. And he pulls it off quite well. He manages to show his frailty, but at the same time, he's a drug-taking egomaniacal nightmare. And he's kind of apologizing. There's this great scene where he comes out of the theater and he's just told a lie to his daughter that he can't hang out with her because he's about to go and shag a dancer that's waiting for him at his apartment. And he gets to the doors of the theater, he throws his arms down, and you can see look at the ground, and in his head he says, "Oh, I'm such a terrible father." Then it cuts to a sequence where he's discussing his life with death, with Jessica Lange, and he says, "I drink too much. I take drugs. I sleep with too many women. It's such a turnoff, right?" And he looks at death. And you're expecting this woman to say, "Yeah, that's a real big turnoff," and she just looks at him and says, "No, just the opposite." And you think, "No, she's saying that because she's deaf. She is necessarily attracted to everything which is bad about it, everything." And it's kind of I think as a man, particularly in the 70s, you if you could confront all of the negative parts of your personality, he was getting Scheider to do that, and he does that with charm, and it makes you empathize with him. It's a very hard thing to do, I think. It's very ugly. Really, it's a really ugly character.
He really is. And I think that might be why some critics really had a hard time when this came out and just said, "Oh, it's just this is a film where, he's just, promoting himself. It's all this self-love, and it's just, pulling all this darkness out." And, I don't know. I felt like they may have missed it, or maybe they just knew too much about Bob Fosse. I don't know. But I felt like there was so much more going on with this. I mean, this was a film about a person who's really honest. Like knowing more about Bob Fosse as I kind of learned about him in the process of making this, I'm like, I am so almost horrified at the amount of honesty that this man has and is willing to kind of, throw it all out there for everybody to look at. I mean, it's really brave. And I don't know. I was just mind blown and very impressed with all of that when I learned more about him.
In the landscape of filmmaking, there's if you look at the films that were made in the 1970s, and they're very male-based films, very male-based stories, and All That Jazz presents itself as a quite a male film, but really all of the main important characters in the film were all women. His daughter, his mistress, the wife, death. These are the big themes that he wants to address, and he loves all of them, and we are compelled to understand his world through the negligence he has to these women, and they're necessarily cast as being righteous, because the wife loves him and knows he's a scumbag, but she knows he's talented and knows he's got a course to take, and the daughter knows she knows that he's lying. She knows that. But all of these are I've heard people say that All That Jazz is quite a misogynistic film, and I don't think it is. I think it's actually one of the few films that I've seen that where a man honestly portrays the fact that that he is the less of the better of the two sexes in terms of which is better. In fact, he explicitly states that in the film, that he really would prefer to be a woman. He holds women very, very highly. He's just completely incapable of containing his libido or any of his other desires. That the repetitive thing of him standing in front of the mirror in the morning, taking the Dexedrine, listening to the is it Strauss, isn't it? He listens to. I know what in my head.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There's a repetitive thing in his life about these indulgences that are going to send him off the edge. But the only redemptive pieces in his life are the women in his life. There's only redemption, and the final redemption is death herself.
I think on that note, we should talk about the deep scene dive. We asked you to think about a scene that is particularly exemplifies this film, if you were to boil it down to one set of sort of visuals and audio. And I think this position, or the where this scene exists in the film, just about halfway through. I think really, you see the edge. We're walking up to the edge with him in this scene. The scene itself starts right about an hour and 3 minutes in. Do you want to introduce us to the scene and why you picked it?
So they're doing a table read, and so Joe Gideon is he's got his script. He's got all the actors together for the first time, and he's a little bit nervous, and he says to everyone, "Look, we're just going to read this through, and we're going to see what we've got." And it's all cast, and the actors start reading, and the first thing you realize is that the script is really quite corny, and but they start reading, and after the first line or two, everyone starts laughing, and the camera pans around all the people in the room, and everyone's very happy with themselves, and the sound just drops away of the laughter and the actors reading. So the only thing you're left with is the Foley of Joe Gideon's breath and what he's doing in his immediate vicinity, like he's scratching on a piece of paper, and he's he puts his hand on his chest, and you can hear his hand rubbing up against his shirt, and it closes down. So even though you're seeing everybody, you're being told this story visually of everyone's really enjoying this, it's really fantastic, and everyone's like looking at Joe and shaking and nodding, and he is just completely disassociated from it altogether. Now, as a cinematographer, when you get shown scripts, your first thought is, how can I make this work visually? But this doesn't need that. It needs the cinematography just to continue the same line, and it's done in tune with the emphasis on sound. And so Giuseppe Rotunno, a consummate cinematographer who worked a lot with Fellini and a bunch of other people, amazing cinematographer, had the good foresight to keep, rather than going close for certain details, he pulled wide and let the sound emphasize the moments that you needed to look at. There's a point where the camera, you see Joe Gideon from the back, he's sitting on a chair, he's got a pencil in his hand, and he's tapping the pencil in his hand, and you hear the tapping, then he breaks the pencil and drops it on the ground, and all you hear is ta-ta-ta-ta, and then you hear the sound of the pencils hitting the ground, and it's held in one wide shot. And you look at it, and you're so focused on this action that you stop looking at everybody else and just at the pencil. And it's not the photography that's doing that. It's the photography is allowing the sound to focus you on what you should be seeing. And the difference between cinema and television, as it used to be, is that television was in a 4x3 box, and you sat a certain distance from it, and your eyes would never deviate. You would look at this 4x3 box, and everything took place in that frame. But when you were at the cinema, you had to look around. Your eyes had to look all over the screen. And there was a massive difference at that point between cinema and filmmaking in terms of what your expectations were as a cinematographer in terms of guiding people's perception. And in that moment, Giuseppe Rotunno, as one of the simply the finest cinematographers has ever worked, gives an approach to the photography that allows the sound to carry through on that scene and give you a meaning that simply wouldn't be there if those two elements weren't playing against each other. There's virtually no dialogue, but you get the entire story out of this blend of Foley special sound effects and these visuals, which really are working at counterpoint to the story.
There's a moment in there that, for some reason, it's the image that always sticks with me. It's when Joe gets up and he walks over to, I'm not sure if it's scaffolding or something that's kind of up against the back wall, and he kind of rests his hand behind him on the bar of the scaffolding. And this is when all this, the sound is all dropped out, except his thumb just starts moving across it, scratches it, and you just get that sound just emphasizing. And it just, I don't know, it hit me so strongly. It was framed pretty wide, and that was kind of off to one side as you're kind of looking at everything else happening, but you're really drawn into watching his finger scratching. And obviously, I mean, the whole emphasis of the scene is this point in his life where he's kind of hitting this critical place where all of a sudden he's going to have this heart attack and end up in the hospital. But it's just the moment of this person kind of focusing on these details, and the way that emphasis hit me in that particular shot was, I don't know, it was like, that's the little things that he's paying attention to. It's like, that's it. That's what he's paying attention to, the scratching of the metal. But I don't know, there was something really powerful in the smallness of that detail.
Well, Bob Fosse was famous for that in his choreography. He would have all of the dancers stop, and then he would have one person up front making a small hand gesture. So the audience is forced to look at that and nothing else. And then it would take off again. But Bob Fosse has these kind of little quirks about how he does things, and they're about changing focus and emphasis. Whereas a lot of choreographers are all about everything moving and it all's going the entire time, and it's like a massive salad of stuff that's always working. Bob Fosse was really good at pulling the emphasis in and then pushing the emphasis back out, and forcing you to concentrate in different ways. And it sticks out in the movie. He has these really interesting approaches that you just don't see emulated in quite the same way. I mean, a lot of people try and rip Fosse off and fail. I mean, Chicago, the movie, I wanted to go and kill people after that. So it's it was just offensive to me. And because I'm not into that genre, I'm into Bob Fosse's style of doing things. I'm not into the glitz and glamour of a vaudeville or kind of a musical Broadway kind of thing. And I think Bob Fosse, had he seen Chicago, would have been sucking air through his teeth. He wouldn't have liked it too much.
This scene in particular for me, I think, represents the balance. You said he's walking up to the edge earlier, and that for me is this scene, because first he's made us think. The scene immediately before it is the scene with the dancing, the girls in the apartment, the scene of great joy, and you're up here, right? You're emotionally bought into this hope, and then we move into this sequence where the sound drops out, and you realize that in fact there is no hope, and this is Joe completely dissociated from his world, and that is it is the void, the vacuum, the sucking vacuum of hopelessness, and that pivot, I think, is it's a trick that serves I don't know what the word is to describe it. It is the train wreck you can't look away from, right? It's this guy that you hope that you could sort of be the guy that you hope who could watch this woman and the daughter, and exist in the love for that, and then fall completely through the floor.
There's another element to this that is part of how that works, is that you've got these two stories. You've got the stories you're very eloquently describing, that about his personal character, but there's another element to it, which is this other artistic realm, which is a lot of people involved in creating things which are complex find that the organization and thinking about it is where it all happens. Actually getting to do it is crushingly boring. Mm-hmm. So, the creation of the erotica scene and the anxiety involved in that is the pinnacle of his happiness, because he's created it and it's great work. But now he has to deliver on this to an audience, and that part of the process is tedious to him. So it's a form of death in itself. So it actually sticks the two things together. I mean, this is something that I've heard a lot of DPs and directors say before, is the planning of the film and the thinking about the ideas and getting it to work is really where it all lives. Actually executing it and making it can be crushing, because all you do from that point on is you take the limitless aspect of your talents and abilities and your vision, and now you have to face all the compromises of actually making it happen. And it's not a pleasant process. Filmmaking, it to me is much more pleasant in planning than it is in execution. And I really love being on set, but it's the thinking about it beforehand that it really does it for me.
Isn't that a funny thing too? I think that's a really great note. But when he actually walks out into the hallway and says to the, to the team sitting out there, and to Paul, who's sitting there waiting to see what he has done with this ridiculous song, he actually doesn't. I found myself reflecting. He doesn't deliver this line. Joe walks out and he says, "It's a little different." He doesn't deliver that line with any of the sort of anxiety or nervousness that comes with taking someone's work and changing it, and you're about to show him. He presents it like he's bored.
Wait, he goes to the toilet and throws up,
right?
Because he's in that moment if there's a moment when he's going to get judged and he'll take it to heart, it's then. What the audience think, he says this. He's like, what are the audience going to think? He doesn't really care that much. Yeah. He cares if it's a flop, but he cares about impressing the people that care about him. And that's why the strength when he finishes the whole erotica sequence and the lights go up, and he goes to his wife and says, "Oh, I don't think they like it," and she says, "Well, I loved it. I think it's the best work you've done in your life, you son of a bitch," and storms off, because she can't bear the fact that she's, one, still in love with him, two, he's really talented, and three, he seems to be getting creatively better all the time. She wants him to fail at some level, and he won't.
And the problem is he's failing on the wrong level, right? He's deteriorating physically and emotionally, but creatively he's doing some of the best work of his life.
Exactly.
But even with his movie that he's doing, which is, he's like, as he's talking to the producer, he's just like, "Oh, I'm not even going to go to the screening. You go, apologize, tell them it's just a rough cut," all this sort of stuff. And then, it comes out and they're just like, "Oh, everybody loves it. Lines around the block," all that sort of stuff. So it's that way that he has to sell it to himself at that point.
Yeah. Right. This is the curse of riches, right? How can you feel bad for a guy who's having nothing but success? You son of a bitch,
One of the worst things you can do is go and see a film made by someone you care about, because you have to be armed with what I would call safety platitudes, which involve the phrases, "Wow, you've really done it again," or you really pulled that one out of the box. Things that are just are abstract and don't really speak to what you feel about the film, because it's very hard to see product by someone who you admire and love and enjoy it. It's very tricky. It's better to, you should never really hang out with your heroes too much, because you're going to get disappointed. It is best to keep them at arm's length. And it's also with their work as well. I had the misfortune of spending an evening with Adam Curtis, the documentarian, whose work as a documentarian I really, really love. And Adam is not a great human being. He is like his documentaries. He's complex and not particularly nice, and that was fairly recent, and it was crushing to me because I thought that he would have been a better person. Sadly he wasn't.
That's why movie critics don't like to befriend the filmmakers, because it's harder for them to talk critically about films if they're like, oh well, I'm good friends with this particular person.
Yeah, I mean, it's you don't want that baggage. It's bad. It's
Right,
bad enough
exactly.
watching films and trying to be critical about them without that baggage, I think. And I'm not a massive fan of lots of film reviewers either. As I had a very unfortunate conversation a few years back with someone who votes on the Golden Globes, and towards the end of the conversation, I had to pronounce that I really didn't think this person had a single clue as to what they were talking about. It was quite a disturbing conversation. Strange things like she insisted that she would only. This is like 2 years ago. She would only watch movies that were given to her on VHS, and she had like a 4x3 TV, and she would only watch them that way. Otherwise, she just wouldn't watch them.
Wow.
And she wanted it, and she sits a certain distance from the TV that she wants to, so it's incredibly small. And she had this kind of very kind of particular kind of approach to her thinking. So it's kind of strange.
Well, that's sort of on you for associating with people who are actually probably clueless.
Maybe. I give people the benefit of the doubt. How stupid is that? I should be more cynical.
That's right. That's right.
There you go. More like Joe.
I don't think I want to be any more like Joe. Can you imagine?
He's an aspirational figure.
One of my favorite little lines of the film is that right at the beginning, there's this kind of big audition, and these two dancers are dismissed, and they're walking down the stairwell, and one of them says, "Screw him, he never cast me," and the other girl says, "I did screw him, and he still doesn't cast me."
Right.
That's right.
And it's like, think that it's funny, but it's also, it is in the context of what's actually happening in the industry at the moment. It's the same issue. There's a lot of predatory behavior that gets fed into from all sides, and I'm glad that's changing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely. I mean, it's interesting because it's almost like. I mean, I don't want to say it's like a something of the time, but certainly times have changed. But I think that speaks to this film, is that this film is certainly of its era, but in no way do I find this film dated at all. Like, it's not like I watch this film and go, oh God, it's so 70s. I find it takes place in the 70s, but man, this film is just, it's so, just everything in it feels so present still. And that, I think, is a magic that Bob Fosse has, the way that
I agree. I really think that people should be watching this film in this era to look at the warning signs that were presented to us all of this time ago. This kind of behavior was very bad behavior. And Bob Fosse was telling you throughout the entire film that this was very bad behavior. And that the only redemptive characters in this film were these women who had a moral position and wanted to be respected and wanted to be loved and were willing to reciprocate. And it gives you a moral story that's important today in the context of what's happening now. And you can show this film without making any changes at all to the flow of the story and still get that message. But Joe is a representative of an era and of a lifestyle and of a paternalistic attitude towards the industry that is in, that he paints as being very, very bad, and at the time, Bob all that jazz got a lot of flack for that. People saying, "Oh, he's moralizing," and he doesn't really understand. But he was had his finger on the pulse.
He was holding up a mirror. Yeah, and I think that's in that regard, it's all that much more surprising that this movie even got made.
Well, and what's great is how people have taken this film and used it to kind of use it as an influence. I already talked about like the Michael Jacksons and all the dancing and stuff. But I mean, look at people like Darren Aronofsky and Requiem for a Dream, and just the way that he's cutting the montages together in that film. I mean, it's very reminiscent of what Bob Fosse was doing back in 1979. It speaks so strongly to the power of cinema, and that Bob Fosse had tapped so strongly into it back then. I mean, it's really quite a feat that he accomplished here.
The opening sequence, which is cut to a George Benson track.
Mm-hmm.
It's just Alan Heim's editing on that. It's just fantastic, and you're thinking that they're cutting and with what we see now is extremely rudimentary equipment. and bound by some very, very heavy physical restraints as to what you could do in terms of editing and all of the little mismatches that you see in that scene that you could easily fix in Adobe Premiere. That a 12-year-old could do it. Yet they were battling up against these restraints that in technology that were formidable. But it's an amazingly well cut piece. I play that for people over and over and over again. If we got like 20 minutes and we're waiting for something to happen, I'll just play that scene. It's just an amazing bit of editing and cinematography.
And story to cut down what Fosse, what his life is at its most banal, and to actually make it feel like it is both full of energy, in terms of moving the narrative forward and letting us see what his life looks like, but to also do it in a way that actually demonstrates this is terrible. This is a terrible way to cast. This is a terrible way to, to have to live your life and judge people, and also demonstrate how Joe can do it with kindness and love and generosity. Like, you watch him and his little handshakes as he moves people on. He's not a terrible person in this context.
Yeah, when he's lining up the dancers and he comes across one dancer and he says, "What shows have you been in?" And she says, "Oh, I was in The Wizard of Oz." And he says, "Who directed that?" He says, "You did, Mr. Fosse." Oh, you did, Mr. Gideon. Yeah, and she's like,
see, that's how you get a part.
Exactly. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's a fantastic scene.
And then going back to the erotica scene as well, the people he casts in the erotica scene is this incredibly multicultural, diverse kind of collection of gay people, straight people, black people, Asian people, white people. You end up with this really interesting multicultural reflection of what he wants to offer in this piece, and he does it. You can see the care he's paying as a not only as a choreographer and director, but as in the character of the film. The character wants to show the world in a better light. He wants the world around him to be a better place. He really only trusts the opinion of women. But even though it's just this terribly despicable character, he is, if you were to create that character in a modern film, you couldn't have actually represented him any better than he's being represented in and all that jazz.
All right, we need to let's move on to awards season. How did this film, Andy? You documented how this film did at awards season, yeah.
Yeah, the film ended up with 10 wins and 14 other nominations. At the Oscars alone, it had 9 nominations. It won for, I believe, 4 of them. It won for art direction and set decoration. It won for costume design. It won for film editing, of course. And it won for best original music. And then the ones that it lost Best Picture to Kramer versus Kramer, which we've talked about on this show. I would have to say I would pick All That Jazz. Yeah. I mean, I love Kramer versus Kramer. It's a powerful film, but it's not all that jazz. Roy Scheider, the man who represents the 70s better than any other actor, he lost Best Actor to Dustin Hoffman for Kramer versus Kramer. Bob Fosse lost Best Director to Robert Benton for Kramer versus Kramer. Best Original Screenplay, they lost to Breaking Away. Best Cinematography lost to Apocalypse Now. That might be the one I agree with. I think that as much as I love the cinematography here, I might still side with Apocalypse Now.
It's like you cannot compete with Apocalypse Now. Just can't. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Apocalypse Now was competing with Dunkirk. It would win. It would win. I mean, you make Apocalypse Now compete with any movie, and I'm sorry, it would win. That'd be it.
It is.
So we can't really include that one.
It's hard though because the Oscars do.
Yeah.
So and that's the other trick with Best Picture. Is it Kramer versus Kramer or Apocalypse Now or All That Jazz? Just throwing Apocalypse Now in makes it hard for me.
It does. Well, I forgot that Apocalypse Now was
same year.
To think that Apocalypse Now, All That Jazz, and Kramer versus Kramer are running for Best Picture, and Kramer versus Kramer wins.
It's stunning. It is.
And I like Kramer versus Kramer, but it's like over Apocalypse Now, really?
Meh.
Yeah, I know. It's a tough one. It's crazy to think that happened. I mean, Breaking Away, Norma Rae, those are the other 2 nominees. I think Norma Rae is a brilliant, brilliant piece of filmmaking that Martin Ritt did. But Breaking Away is my least favorite of the bunch. I don't really care for that one. But,
really?
Yeah, I don't.
I love that film.
I really couldn't connect with those guys. I just struggled with that through the whole thing. I struggled with that film.
I was big into cycling when I was in my teenage years, and Breaking Away was like, one of those films that it was just like, I just loved it. It was like, it was really,
Is that one that you saw at a younger age then?
Yeah, I saw. It's funny because I saw all of those films when I was like 14, 15 years old, and Breaking Away and all that jazz had a massive impact on me. I really liked Apocalypse Now, but not as much as those other two films had an effect on me.
See, I think Breaking Away is a film that might be one that you need to see at the right age to really click with. Because I just watched that like a month ago for the first time, and I just was like way past that group of boys, and I could not connect with them, and I really struggled with it. So
I think Breaking Away is more like a Lady Bird movie. I think Lady Bird is a great movie. Sam Levy, who shot Lady Bird, is a good friend of mine. He did a marvelous job, but I don't think it'll have legs as a film over time. I think it's like I can't remember her name's on the tip of my tongue. Who was the actress? Dark hair, was in a Hard Candy. What's her name?
Oh, Ellen Page.
Ellen Page. She did that film Juno, which I really liked. But I look back at it now, and it's dated so badly. It really is. It fit for that moment, but I don't think time will be kind to it, and I don't think time is necessarily that kind to Breaking Away as a movie. But for me, it's locked into a certain period when I was really heavily into cycling, and that was kind of it locked in a time. But it's one of those films I'm kind of worried about watching again because I think I'll hate it if I watch it again.
Don't watch it again. It's not worth it, man. Keep the memory.
Yeah.
Keep the memory alive.
Keep the memory alive. Don't mess with it.
The other award that I was going to bring up, though, as far as awards that this film garnered, there was a little thing back there in 1979 called the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards. It was apparently something that ran from 78 to 2006. It was an LA-based group of film buffs and movie critics devoted to honoring the worst films of the year. And that year, they decided to nominate Max Wright as the worst supporting actor. Max Wright, of course, plays the film producer who is constantly worrying about all the trouble that Joe is causing with their budget. I remember him from Alf. That is my memory of Max Wright. I don't remember him from anything else, but that and this film. It's so funny. But he did not win Worst Supporting Actor. It went to Ricky Schroeder for The Champ, which I think is unfair because he was a kid in that film.
What's Max Wright's line? God, he says, God made the world in 7 days and didn't go into overtime once. That was his key line.
That was his big line, and then
that was a great
it is right. It is better, God
damn
it is better.
No,
something like that.
He gets great lines, and when he is, I think Bob Fosse plays him as a caricature because I think that those kind of people do become caricatures of themselves. They just have to whinge about the money and the overages. That's what they do.
Yeah.
Well, the fact that they have Wallace Shawn in the background of this thing calculating away in the boardroom, I thought was also delightful. The cast is just amazing in this movie. Anyway, Andy, how to do at the box office?
Well, by the time Fosse finished, he'd spent $12 million to make All That Jazz, which is $39.7 million in today's dollars. The movie had a holiday opening, hitting theaters December 20th, 1979, where it opened opposite Roller Boogie and Cuba.
Wow.
Two classics that I'm sure everybody remembers. It landed at 4th place for opening weekend, landing behind those two, as well as Star Trek The Motion Picture, which was holding the top spot still here in its 3rd week of release. Fosse's film went on to make $37.8 million at the box office, which is about $125.2 million in today's dollars. All told, it did well for itself, landing with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $695,000.
See, now, if it had made that kind of money today, we would have had a sequel to this movie.
Yeah, All That Jazz too.
As long as there's more Ben Vereen.
Joe rides again.
See, it would have been Ben Vereen. It's a prequel story about Ben Vereen. This is gold.
Yeah.
Somebody write this down.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to lay on you an entertainer, a humanitarian, and my closest personal friend for the last 25 years.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I think it is time for us to rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You will find our list of movies, every movie we've talked about on this show, and you can add this film to your own stack rankings. Just swipe over in your show notes and hit Flickchart. It'll take you right there to this movie, and you can add it to your list and see where it stacks up against ours. All right, Andy, here we go.
All right, first up, we have All That Jazz, or The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the Swedish version. I'm going with All That Jazz.
So how do I do this?
You just pay. So this is what you have to do. This is the frame of mind you need to be in. You are alone on a desert island. All you have is is a TV and these two discs. Okay, and you just have to pick which one would you put on first. What do you like better?
All That Jazz every single time.
Okay, let's just see, because I hate to break out the spoiler, but Apocalypse Now is actually in the list somewhere. You may run into this. So just say, okay, All That Jazz. So All That Jazz.
It's every single time.
All right.
I'm a sucker. I just got to go, and I'm loyal. That's why I'm a loyal.
I love
sucker.
it. I love it.
You're a loyal. All right. Okay.
All That Jazz or Live Free or Die Hard. It is All That Jazz for me.
All That Jazz for me.
I'm assuming All That Jazz. Okay. All That Jazz.
All That Jazz or Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. I'm going to say All That Jazz.
All That Jazz, really? I'm a child of Khan.
Don't say it.
I know you are. And I am too.
I know you're going to say All That Jazz. It doesn't matter. I have already resigned myself to the position of
I would be
third wheel.
I would be happy
okay.
to give up half of the times I watched All That Jazz to have never seen Wrath of Khan. How about that?
Oh, wow.
How about that? How about that's doubling down? How do you like that?
That's
How do you like them apples?
This is my breaking away, man. Don't you take that away from me.
The Wrath of Khan. Who was the guy? Was it Ricardo Montalban who played?
All right.
Who was the guy who played Khan? Montalban.
Yeah, it was
Ricardo Montalban.
You're right.
Yeah, with his chest
Yeah,
all.
it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yep. That's fantastic. All right,
Okay,
next up we
fine.
have All That Jazz or Children of Men. Brilliant film.
I'm assuming you're going to
Yeah.
say All That Jazz again.
I can't. I'm loyal.
All right, Andy.
He said all the way to the top. Pete, you go first. I'm still thinking.
I'm Children of Men on this one.
I
can't believe it because anyway. Go ahead.
I feel like I'm going to be All That Jazz.
Come
on.
I'm putting a wedge between you guys. I feel really bad about it.
Oh,
This
you
is where
wouldn't believe
this
how many
is
times we
this
do rock,
begins
paper,
the downward
scissors.
spiral
So
of the
Alex,
next
if you
reel.
put Wrath of Khan and Children of Men over All That Jazz, we have to have a private chat.
All right, what's
wow.
next? What's next? Embarrass me some more, Andy.
All right, next up we have All That Jazz or this is where it gets tough for me. The original Die Hard. I have to go with Die Hard. Here.
No. How?
I do. It was
Okay,
formative for
okay.
me. This came out at a very pinnacle point in my life. And it's brilliant. It's a brilliant film.
It's Die Hard, and we love you anyway.
I can. There's films you could say that could come close for me, like really close, but none of these so far. I wonder if do you have any more?
This is speaking of the influences of Fosse and All That Jazz. We have All That Jazz or Requiem for a Dream.
All That Jazz.
See, now I would expect you to be pushed around by Requiem for a Dream here, Nick. Come on.
No, not at all. I think that Requiem for a Dream is a little. I find Darren Aronofsky a great director, but incredibly self-conscious. I don't find a lot of authenticity in what the films he makes. I find them very interesting and very visual, but I find they're a bit cold. And in the same way that I find Christopher Nolan cold. We should talk about Dunkirk at some point. If you want vitriol and bile from me, you'll get bundles of that movie.
I am actually All That Jazz on this one.
I'm really torn on this one. I feel like I'm leaning toward Requiem for a Dream, but maybe it's the recency. I'm going to actually say All That Jazz.
All
So
right. The recency hallucination.
Wow.
I know. All That Jazz or Mad Max Fury Road.
Okay, if you'd have said Mad Max original, there would have been a moment of doubt about my position. Fury Road, no.
Wow.
I mean, Fury Road's great. It's a really good film.
It is.
But
it is.
the first Mad Max it spoke to There's two great Australian films, I think, that paint a picture of Australia as a country. Awake in Fright. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen Awake in Fright.
By Ted Kotcheff, an American director, made a film about the Australian outback. It's astonishing. And the first Mad Max, it really speaks to because I grew up in Australia. It's really those films speak to what Australia is actually like as a country, and in so many ways, it's quite frightening. So I'm
trying to internalize what you are saying here.
It's the closest one that's come to All That Jazz, but I have to say All That Jazz.
Andy,
I feel like I'm going to say Fury Road, but I might say All That Jazz. I'm really torn on this one.
I am Fury Road on this one.
Oh, so it's all on me now.
Yeah, it is. It is totally on you.
Can you give me one good reason why Fury Road's better than All That Jazz?
I already told you that last half hour broke me, man. It's not a thing I get a lot of joy out of watching, and
it's difficult. It's painful. It's really painful. It's true.
I do.
And that's and that's what I fall to with All That Jazz.
I love what it is, but if I'm sitting on a desert island with these two movies, I'm going to put on Fury Road first.
Really?
It's truly it's unrankable. These are hate crime films, right? You can't rationally compare these two movies. And so I recognize that. I can love and appreciate it and not watch it first.
I just can't believe I'm getting you to entertain the idea of defending yourself.
I actually can't believe that either.
If anyone's being irrational here, it's me.
That's why we love doing
What am I going to watch? A story about a guy who's kind of basically committing suicide on film very, very slowly? Or Fury Road, a good feel-good movie about the apocalypse. I mean, of course, if I've got beer, Fury Road's probably going to be it. But I can't possibly say that to you. It's got to be All That Jazz.
Right, and I'll cut this part for you, for your reputation's sake. Are we done? Please tell me we're done.
I had to go with Mad Max Fury Road, and it really just boiled down to the joy of cinema and watching that, just because it is a viscerally fun movie to watch. All That Jazz is just one of my favorites. It's a brilliant film, and I love seeing it, but it is a harder film to watch. It's not quite Schindler's List level, but it is a hard film to watch for me.
Yeah.
So I picked Mad Max Fury Road, and I apologize for that. I do feel guilty now. But that did put All That Jazz at number 15 on our flick chart, which is a fantastically stellar spot considering we've talked about nearly 350 movies so far. So I think that is a pretty good spot for this film to have landed.
That's a solid place. You speaking of Sam Levy, which he was on the show. Like, what did he pick?
Fat City. Fat
City. Where was Fat City on our list? Do you remember? I want to make sure that you one up Levy if you're friends with him. That's important to us.
I want to call him up.
Because I feel like if we're going to drive a wedge between relationships here, this is turnabout right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna. If I'm higher than him, I'm gonna text him straight away.
Fat City is a great film, but I don't think it even ended up in the top half of the films. It's a much tougher film for both of us to watch, but it is still a really strong film.
I need to watch Fat City again. In fact, I think a bit of a homework for you two guys. I think if you haven't seen Wake in Fright, that's
on the list. Yeah,
that's really, you should see that. That's an amazing film. It's truly frightening. It took an American to come to Australia to make a film that was truly about what Australia was like, because I think he hated it and was horrified. And his daughter is a very good friend of mine, Kate Kotcher. I never got to the bottom of it with her. We never got to that part of the conversation. But he makes the film as if he hates the country, and you can feel it.
It's a really, real love letter.
And Australians really understand what he's talking about, because he just identifies these elements of the Australian mindset that are just kind of scary.
That's fantastic.
It's got the brilliant Jack Thompson in it.
Yeah,
so I'll have to
Jack Thompson is
Jack Thompson, Donald Pleasance. Wow.
Donald Pleasance. Oh, totally. All right. This has been a lot of fun. Nic, thanks for joining us, man.
Well, man, it's been great. I've had a great time.
And a big thanks also to Harry Stranger for helping us get all of this sorted out on all of our schedules.
He's a top man. I've never met him.
He's fantastic.
He's Australian.
With a great name.
We haven't either, but he's been great. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Harry. And Meredith.
Yep.
And Meredith, and all of you.
Longtime cohorts.
And for all of you out there, we hope you enjoyed the show. Just head on over to thenextreel.com where you can find out all the places on social media where you can follow us. And we invite you to support us over on patreon.com/thenextreel. Don't forget to head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and comment as well. It really does help more people find us. Thanks again for tuning in. And for everyone out there, it's showtime, folks.
I'm gonna use you to be my friend.
It's hard to believe that we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great conversations over the years about so many great movies. All that said, producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes.
Becoming a Next Reel member gives you access to all sorts of additional and exclusive content. Plus, you're helping us keep the lights on. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership, where you can learn more about becoming a member, which costs a measly $5 a month, practically the same as one fancy coffee drink. And you get so much more.
Every month, we record a bonus episode exclusively for members. Those episodes cover movies from whatever series we're covering at the moment or add to previous series.
Some movies we've covered that only members get to hear us discuss include The Blues Brothers,
The Russia House,
Naked Lunch,
Independence Day,
The Hot Rock,
and Relic, the better one. Plus, members get to vote on what we're going to discuss for those episodes.
We also record additional pre- and post-show content in regular episodes that only members get to hear.
Like conversations about similarly themed movies.
And answering listener questions from our live member chat.
Speaking of our live member chat, we record almost all of our episodes in Discord, where members can chat right along with us live.
Members get access to other members-only channels in our Discord community as well. On top of all that, members get all episodes a full week earlier than everyone else in a private Next Reel feed just for them that includes all the shows in the Next Reel family. The Next Reel, the Film Board,
movies we like, Sitting in the Dark, and more new projects on the way.
To top it all off, members don't have to listen to ads. We've already eliminated those annoying, dynamically inserted ads that, let's face it, we all hated.
We are listening to you.
We love podcasting for a living, and those ads helped pay the bills. Now, we're counting on you, dear listener.
We promise. We aren't going back to those terrible, dynamically inserted ads that don't relate to us at all. All we ask is that you consider supporting the Next Reel family of podcasts with a membership.
Again, it's $5 per month or $55 per year. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership.
thenextreel.com/membership. Get your access to early, ad-free episodes with bonus content, member bonus episodes, and access to member channels and live streams in Discord by signing up today.